everybody, and welcome to People, Power, and Photovoice. We're talking to authors in the field of Photovoice, and we're here hosted by the Journal of Health Promotion Practice. It's a special series of podcasts on Photovoice with the little method that could change the world. We have a special issue coming up totally focused on Photovoice in January 2022. And for those of you new to Photovoice, it's a participatory visual method where participants take and discuss photos on health promotion issues relevant to their lives and then act to change them through raising awareness, mitigation of problems, and transformation of the policies that oppress us. Yes, in advance of this special issue, we want you to have you meet some of the folks behind this project, and with a brief opportunity to chat about their experiences with the method, the people they work with, their thoughts about the roots and the frontiers of the application of this method and the world of health promotion and the power that is within us. All right, so kicking out to this inaugural series, we have in the room, I'm so excited, we have Kathleen Roe, who's the editor of the Health Promotion Practice, and my own personal childhood hero, Bob Strack. Even though he's about the same age as me, he is in the room. So welcome, both of you. Do you want to just say hi, a little chit chat? This is a podcast. You can laugh, you can be on camera.
I love the fact that you're so enthusiastic, and it's 11 o'clock here, but it's only 8 o'clock there. So you've obviously had your share of coffee already. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is a side plug to Cafe Valhalla, just down the street. Right. A brutal brew, but it does the work. Kathy, how are you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm just fine. I'm so excited to be here with both of you. Thanks for setting this up.
It's so super to have you. And you really kind of had this germ of this idea when you started as an editor that you wanted to do a Photovoice issue. Why? What got you going?
You know, it's even older than that, because I was on the founding board of Health Promotion Practice as an associate editor. And the very first issue of Health Promotion Practice in 2000 had as one of its most important articles a contribution by Caroline Wang. It was only, I think, about the third or fourth publication she had done on Photovoice at the time. And it was selected for our very first issue for very particular reasons. It was an exciting method. It was a generative method. It introduced technology, cameras, it introduced technology and power. It changed the agency of research from researcher to participant and collaborator. And it required that there be an action towards systems or policy change embedded in the method and the timeline and the outcomes of the project. And for Health Promotion Practice, that seemed like exactly what we wanted to infuse in all kinds of research. So more than 20 years ago, I was excited about this method and so proud that this little journal that I was getting to be a part of was featuring it so centrally in its very first issue. So 20 years later, when I became editor-in-chief of Health Promotion Practice, I wanted to revisit that. I wanted to have an issue that would bring together the best of Photovoice, some friendly, supportive critique of Photovoice, some nudging it into the future, and some exemplars of what's the best of Photovoice. Go ahead, but I couldn't do it by myself, right? I can't do it because I don't do Photovoice research. So I had to put together a group. So first I invited Bob onto our editorial board with this idea in mind. And then I seated Robin at a luncheon next to Bob as this idea started to grow.
Room. Yeah, it was like, Bob, I want you to sit next to this person, but there's no room. So you're going to be elbow to elbow. You're going to be buddies by the end of the lunch.
This is pre-COVID days, folks. This is pre-COVID.
Exactly, pre-COVID.
Yeah, and so there it is. We have dedicated an entire issue to Photovoice. I think it's really important to note that this is not a funded issue. This is an issue put together by authors who love this method, who know the potential of this method and are committed to putting together something that you can read front to back, full of Photovoice articles and insight.
Yeah, and I love what you said, that maybe this was one of the first methods to kind of crest this horizon of combining participatory action, research, participatory action practice, right? But it crystallized it into this place where people were actually thinking about taking actions. Like it motivates people towards take action. So, that's funny that this little camera suddenly began to sort of change the health promotion world in this unique way. Bob, you kind of came into this early. You were an early researcher as well in Photovoice. How did you How did it grab you?
Well, sometimes it's just a matter of timing, right? And I think you and I have definitely talked about how we both got plugged into this method. I remember reading her photo novella article as a grad student. Yeah, it was one of those pieces that you read where you recognize not only the power of the method, but also the application. So I'm a big Kurt Lewin fan. I believe that, action research is part of what we should do as professionals. I don't believe in leaving a community worse off after you going in there. So I've always believed that we have a role to play in society. So that method just out of the gate spoke to me. And it was so beautifully written. I mean, that's one thing I'll say. Carolyn's work is just so insightfully written. But it kind of stuck with me. And then when I went off to Baltimore and worked at Johns Hopkins, I thought, well, this is my chance to write a little proposal. We got $10,000 to do this project, $8,000 of which went to my grad student. And then we had $2,000 budget. And that's when we did our first Photovoice project in Baltimore with young people in Highlandtown, Canton of Baltimore. I mean, I think it's really the first time a publication came out with youth and trying to do the method with youth. At the time, because I have a health education background, I recognized we have this method, but we don't really have a very good tool set to guide people through it. So my Greek GA and I, we created a curriculum, like lesson 1, what's our objectives, what are our activities, lesson 2, we did the whole thing. And we carried it out. It worked great. We published it, and that was in HPP. I can't even remember, it was 2001, I guess. Yeah. And it's been cited a ton. But that was really when I got hooked in, and after that, it was just I think you accused me of this before, how do we bring it to the people? How do we bring it to the masses? How do we make it so that people know how to do this method? What are the steps? What are these?
Because I mean, I think what you're also talking about, I keep thinking about your phrase around the power of the method. It's cheap. It doesn't cost a heck of a lot. It's an incredibly powerful method. You shouldn't be, I mean, one of my cautions is don't be deluded that it's going to be really easy just because it doesn't cost very much to do. However, it can have this great power, right? And
power comes because people get excited and embraced and they invest their time. But honestly, now you got cell phones. Back then we had to buy $20 disposable cameras and get people to donate the development and donate the enlarging so you could have exhibits. So there are strategies to kind of do it, as you say, cheap. But that doesn't mean it's easy. That's the one thing I always really remind people. It's like, you may be able to do this, you may be able to get people involved, but to do it well needs some conscious effort. And that's some of what, the special issue is really trying to do. I mean, gosh, there's been so much published. There's been good and bad published on it. And there's so many things that need to be examined, torn apart, put back together, push the field. I mean, there's just so much this method can do. And can you think of a better time in society when we need a method that gives voice and power to the people? I mean, so often as academics and researchers, we control the narrative in a way that I think is not healthy. And this is a chance to put this power, like we always talk about power over, power with. This is moving to the power with, power to, where the community is part of that conversation. That's really where it's at.
Because we got this. I was thinking about your sort of log, your lesson plan thing. That bled through to the nation. I think that people picked up on that from that article, because when I started to think of doing a Photovoice project, I was really interested in what's invisible, right? And so I got pushback because childhood asthma and asthma inequities are kind of like this invisible thing, right? So they were like, how can you take a photograph of that? But I talked to a friend who was working with Latino communities in South Seattle. And she said, oh yeah, it's great. I just did it with our group of kids in the youth center. This was not a published thing. It was just through relationships. And she sent me this whole curriculum. And now I'm thinking that some of that probably was from you somehow inside the curriculum. Yeah, because it was like 2008, 2009 when I was first encountering this. So Kathy, you've watched these Photovoice projects come and go through the journal, and you've seen these types of things happen. Where do you think, what are the frontiers for you in terms of health promotion practice? You're faculty emeritus now. You're looking at this, like these last sets of these couple of journals for these next couple of years. Where do you want to send the field with this project? Where do you think What are the big issues we need to tackle right here, right now? What's the urgency for this work?
Oh, what a fantastic question. I think one thing I would love to see, and I'm sure that this issue is going to do this, is to nudge, encourage researchers and practitioners of the method to take so seriously what it means to ask people to share their experience. When Bob said this is not a simple method, I think one of the places where that really comes up is where we see the impact of someone sharing their experience for the first time, or the impact of articulating through image what it means to live the life that they are living. And we often, as researchers, we ask people about their experience all the time in surveys and interviews and focus groups, and then we walk away.
Right.
And they're left with their experience. They're left processing their experience, but we don't have to know anything about that. But in Photovoice, because first of all, the participants share what they've captured, and then they're brought together to talk about it. So the researcher can't distance him or herself from the process they have stimulated. And I think that if we can, at this point in time, remind researchers and encourage them to take so seriously what happens when they ask a question, I would love to see this filter down or infuse our survey research, our focus group research, any time that we take our power to ask questions, to think about what that exchange is going to mean and what is our role in bringing everybody to a place of empowerment and confidence.
You raise a great point. And this is not a Photovoice project, but we did a group interviews with kids in group homes and shelters. And that was a very disenfranchised group. And one of the things we recognized in the process, this was in the Maryland area, a state around Baltimore and DC. But we spent so much time trying to engender confidence with the youth. And the thing we always told our youth was, we're facilitators. You are the experts of your lives. And what you tell us is going to benefit the youth that come after you in the system. And to see the reaction, the ownership, just the manifest urgency that they had to share their story just stuck with me in a way that I can't even express. And so that when you talk about researchers have to get on board, no. I said, yes, but it's really the essence of the method is really taking the side step to positioning the people who are providing their stories, providing their images, dissecting their community, providing avenues for actions that they might want to see. That's really it, right? That's the power of the method, and that's the beauty of the method. And so any researcher that doesn't recognize their ethical responsibility to provide that platform of, I'll call it being a change agent within the situation, they're missing the power of the method. Right. You're a facilitator. You are not the source of knowledge. You're only the facilitator of that knowledge blossoming and making sure that you do your due diligence so that the powers that be, the influencers in the community, are exposed to those voices. And to the extent that those people are not exposed, shame on you. And that's really our ethical responsibility as researchers, to make sure that we recognize that voice.
So what I would hope from an issue is that people who do Photovoice will be inspired by what they read, but that also people who use other methods. And, we all use a mix of methods. So people who have never even imagined themselves doing a Photovoice will question how much responsibility, how much thought have they given to the power of posing questions and to their responsibility to participants. The other thing that I love about this method that I would hope would be one of the contributions of this special issue and thus influence the field going forward is that a researcher always has a big outcome in mind, right? You don't start a Photovoice project just to gather the photos and get the group together and be done with it. There's always the responsibility to take what participants have said or shown or shared and take it directly to a broader audience with action implications. Now, not everybody does that in Photovoice, and there's certainly a lot of really good adapted Photovoice projects and work out there. But I believe that in the original method, the taking the experience that is shared to people with power to change the conditions that created the problem that was being examined is a part of the circle of Photovoice. And if we could excite and inspire researchers who use all kinds of methods to be thinking about that responsibility and those endpoints, I think this issue would have tremendous impact.
Can I ask you a question, Robin?
I want to just, you guys, we're out of time. We didn't get a chance to talk about my stuff, but we'll be back with more of these series to talk more about that. I think what you've captured really is this sort of essential, this researcher with participant, health promotion practitioner with participant, with community member, really kind of coming up with the grand design for those objectives that will share power, change power relations, and change our world. This is this small little project that can. So excited to have you both here today. Thank you very much. We are celebrating the people, power, and Photovoice with health promotion practice. We're going to be talking to more crazy people. Oh my gosh, we have got some amazing people from across the world inside this health promotion practice special editorial board. It's been really fun to be inside of this. Check back with us later. Thanks very much. We've been great. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Bob. And thank you to our earnest engineer, Arden Castle, here today. Thank you.
I am curious, Robin. So I have a question for you, Robin. Kathy sat you next to me at the table. You know, you got an invitation to be a part of the HPP board, right? And you didn't even hesitate to be part of this special issue, and you've been great. And now you've got this idea about this podcast and some of the issues and themes that we're getting in. What do you hope for this special issue? What do you want to see coming out of these contributions and the podcasts that we're recording right now?
There are so many people out there that care, right? But we're taught that there's only one path to walk towards changing society, or we're at least ingrained on us, right? You go to high school, you get your degree, you go to college, you get all of this stuff, and then you're going to go change the world at some point in time down the line, right? And at a certain point in time, I just see so many people sort of getting lost in that path. I felt like I was able to kind of take a step away from that, because I spent so much time, like 10 years in practice, working in the American Lung Association, doing health promotion programming, and getting frustrated as hell, trying to get money to do stuff, to change things. And I remember to my bitter disappointment, right? So a local researcher who was involved in asthma wrote a great paper, a super paper on asthma. And I asked this professor to be an evaluator on a grant that I was going in, because the grant required there to be an evaluator. And they bid the money, almost a third of the money was going to go to this professor to evaluate the grant. And the grant wasn't for very much. And I was just, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. This is just a game, right? This professor doesn't really want to do this work, or else they do it for free. They want to do this for other reasons. They're going to charge, which is, I mean, I get it. And at the same time, I felt like health promotion is sort of like losing its way, right? From when people used to do things with dirt, nothing, right? And for me, that's kind of, I think, in some way, part of the magical ethic of this conversation we just had right now. You just need a camera. You don't need a very expensive one, and you just need a bunch of voices who care, who want to do something. My frustration is that I don't think grantors inside this sort of qualitative pocket that we're in have the sensibility to kind of understand the power. So if we do a special issue, that's going to be sourced, I would think, in a bunch of people writing grants, right? A bunch of people pushing this back up to NIH, pushing this back up to a place where this is really now, it establishes the tradition in a form. Your work is key in terms of that public elevation, working with Boys and Girls Clubs, doing all that kind of stuff. I wanted to have a laugh about, is there a capital V in Photovoice, right? Because that's classic. You see those articles come through and someone's Googled Photovoice. I even got corrected the first time I wrote a proposal, and then they went back, oh no, it's got a capital V in the middle of it. And they don't understand that there's this whole sort of business that's grown up around Photovoice. It's a quasi business. I don't know how super profitable it is, but there's like people doing some work in this in right and righteous ways. And at the same time, academia has sort of like gotten stuck in this puddle where Kathy says people you got to have the big vision before you go in. You got to put your big boy pants on before you take this method on, right? And I think that's a good, that was cool to hear, Kathy, because that kind of challenges us, right, to really think about this as serious. It's the little method that could, but it's the cost. It's like a subversion. It's like a little Gramsci project, right? Inside something larger.
You know what's changed over time, though, I've noticed, and maybe you've picked up on this too, but from when I first started doing this method in various communities, various topics, various strategies, lengths, etc., the thing that's come up in spades, and I'd say in the last 8 years, is storytelling. This awareness of humans' need for story, humans' need for connection. And this is an old theme, right? So, I mean, one of the things that's drawn me to some of the people that I work with is people's love of Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, and using sort of like the metaphorical thinking that we have, archetypal thinking for how we use to create sense out of society, sense out of our lives. And if you look at human experience, it's really about sense making. So researchers come at it with data and logic, but most people operate from a realm of connection and humanity. And the thing about Photovoice is it provides a platform for a little bit of both. It provides a platform for the storytelling, and to the extent that the commercial sector, the capitalist sector has really latched on to storytelling and what they've really researched it. Researchers are doing it some and doing more of it. And I think there's this hunger right now in this moment in society for those connections, and storytelling and the pieces of story and connection are really the next frontier of research. So I predict researchers and research funders are going to begin to value and expect some credibility to what this method is embodied in, what its foundation roots are, which is really around human connection. So there's a lot of work to do. So I'm really kind of curious about what are some of the other conversations you want to have in these podcasts to bring to people? What are some of the things you want to uncover, to pick apart, to talk about, to explore with other Photovoice thinkers?
Well, I do want to talk. I think the focusing on power and focusing, because that's the first step to being able to tell a story, right? Is putting yourself in a position of vulnerability, right? To show a part of yourself. And I push back on this idea of lived experience a little bit, because that's one way of viewing experience. I think of it more as living experience, of recreating our experiences. The photo tells one story to one person, but then it tells a different story 2 seconds later.
And the caption.
There's this wonderful quote. I think it's Uli Steck. It's maybe Uli Steck or maybe Thompson in England, who did a bunch of visual work with the quasi Photovoice study. But anyway, she was noticing how kids can kind of like, kids are so like plastic in terms of their ways of thinking, is that they can look at an image and express a kind of traditional conceptualization, and then with a little bit of quizzing with their friends, they'll take it, they'll turn the picture upside down, and they'll come up with a new idea about how this is formulated. And they're actually working in different sort of bands of knowledge. What you talk about in terms of storytelling kind of reaches out through varieties of knowledges, right? Varieties of epistemologies, like indigenous, but also critical theory, bunch of different ways of personal ways of knowing, socio-political ways of knowing, all of these different ways of knowing sort of encapsulated in that sort of storytelling dynamic. But the photo is a prompt for and a stimulus for all of these different ways of confronting reality.
Well, isn't that's Freire right there? That's critical consciousness. That's that movement from passive adaptation to some emotional engagement.
Yeah.
To like that cognitive awakening about root causes, and then that anger that comes with wanting to take action and do something about it. It's that transition from passive adaptation or passive acceptance of a situation to, I can't take this anymore, I got to do something.
Right, and that's the other second conversation I really want to have with Ryan and Kathy is this whole thing about critical consciousness, because Kathy's awesome that she can make me think about something with just 2 words. Like, so the last time we met, she was talking about solidarity. It was like,
I think it's the Melbourne accent.
Solidarity, and I'm interested in the solidarity is really that you have to give something for solidarity, right? And I was like, thanks, Kathy. I'm going to settle on that thought and think about that for a whole month before I see you again. So
we're Americans. We don't give. We just take.
and like Ryan's conceptualization about power and groundedness is just like super cool. So having them kind of talk about conversations about power, right? Some traditional and non-traditional kind of conceptualizations of power, and how Photovoice might undermine that or reinvent that. I think it does through some of the things of storytelling. And then that critical consciousness conversation. And then, Claudia Mitchell to me is someone I don't really know very well. So I really want to sort of get a better idea about, she's just so expansive. She's done so many things in different places that it's going to be super exciting to kind of get her in a room and try and talk with her around that. And then our conversation, Kathy, we had a great
counter narrative, and how do you get voice out to people, and how do you recognize a moment in society where another paradigm is required in the public square, where that conversation has a representation of all parties, and using it in a very proactive way with all the commitments that he got from the city to have a counter voice to a very negative time in our country's history was just a beautiful thing to listen to. I'm excited about the conversation with Ed.
I wonder whether you should be at that, because you and Ed go way back.
We do.
In terms of that work. So
this can be part of the sort of the unscripted, unedited part of the podcast, where you just you put it up without editing. And so because it's that section, I have to tell you the joke that Ed always told me. It's like a grasshopper walks into a bar, and the bartender says, "Hey, we got a drink named after you." And the grasshopper says, "You got a drink named Bob?" A terrible joke. We made Ed tell that joke no less than 30 times as we trooped around.
Every Sophie meeting.
As we trooped around DC.
There's a British translation for that one, actually.
It was but
Ed's into the bar, and he goes, "What, Eric?" So yeah.
But Ed's a passionate, just like, that thing I love about the board we put together. And we didn't know all these people. We've got people all around the country. We've got people from Canada, all around the world. They're on this thing, and we're having these conversations. And the thing that strikes me in these conversations, which I think is what's prompted us to have these conversations, is the people that are drawn to this method have a passion and a drive that's palpable from the minute you talk to them. And that sense of duty to lend voice it's just there. It's like ingrained in how they approach their mindset about truth, the discovery of truth, and the role of researchers in society. And that's, you don't have to pull it out of them. It's just evident in everything they say and do. I mean, don't you agree?
And the rediscovery of truth.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I do agree.
And we started planning this a couple of years ago, and I picked the date just kind of arbitrarily when I accepted a certain term for this appointment. But I don't think there could be a more important time to call people to think about this method and all of the commitments behind the method than now. There are so many stories that need to be told in a different way, so many life experiences that need to be brought forward and shared and in the mix. And what time at least in our lifetimes, can we imagine where facts and information had just kind of lost their power and new ways of knowing are needed again? And the artful researcher's ability to weave together a coherent new story or a new narrative that's useful, that's actionable for policy and for system and environmental change and mind change and heart change, there's no better time than right now. We need this method and we need these commitments, I think, now more than ever.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about whether, Photovoice, when people used to have those digital cameras, you can't even, they're getting really hard to buy, right? So obviously we've all got switched to the photos we're taking all our time. But, the question always kind of comes to mind is this an outdated method? Because it relies on a camera. And everybody's taking photographs all the time. We've got Instagram. What do you need Photovoice for? We've got movies. My daughter kind of lives and breathes YouTube the entire day long, right? It's the only thing keeping her going during COVID lockdown, right? But at what point in time are we completely inundated by images that we cease to care anymore? That they don't mean anything. They don't matter to us anymore. And I worry about that inside this method. And yet I still sort of see it failing through this.
No, I see.
It's not quite about Instagram. It's not quite about YouTube. It's different than that.
Right.
It's not even the same. Yeah, it's totally different. Years ago, someone asked me, how come you're not doing video voice, right? Instead of photo voice. Because now you can do these videos. I said, you know what? Here's why. Because of all the reasons you just said, we're inundated with images coming across our face. We're inundated with the opportunity to see documentaries. I mean, documentaries are now as popular as big run Hollywood productions. Why? Because they're telling a story.
Right.
But the thing that's different about Photovoice and the static image is the caption that goes with it. And you've heard me say this 100 times, is the image is only 10% of the package, right? It's the caption that matters, and the discussion that goes into creating the caption, and the combination of that photo and that caption creates enough space for a reflective connection with the person that took the photo and the person that's telling the story. It's that moment of reflection that you need. It's that moment to really think about what's being said. And I'll argue all the time with folks, and encourage is a better word, that if you're gonna do Photovoice, you really need to have an exhibit. You need to have something where the photographers have a chance to represent their voice, their images, their caption. And you need the space to where the people you're trying to move, the influencers, the community leaders, the parents, the media, get a chance to look at a photo and look a person that took the photo in the eye and have a conversation with them. And that conversation is what moves people. So I would argue the opposite, that this is needed now more than ever, because it creates that space for a deeply reflective thought to give its attention that it's deserving of, right? And so it's that moment, that element of human connection, of story, that pause to reflect on what's going on here, and not just say, oh, that's terrible, and then moving on to the next thing. You need to hold that space so that that issue gets its diligence that it deserves, and its attention that it deserves. And that's how it's not the same as all the things you articulated. It really sets it apart.
Is it possibly, Kathy, that it's one of the essences of health promotion practice, this core that Bob's talking about, that reflective moment with community person, that connection that we make across our human divides, that somehow the photograph is brokering this type of a connection for change?
I would hope that in our practice that was centered and that we were mindful of that. I'm not sure that we always are, like you were speaking about earlier, Robin, that sometimes we're just in the business of doing our work or doing our job, or, meeting outcomes, and it's just a machine. But just as you say, at the heart of this work that so many of us have chosen, have been drawn to, is the generativity that's there, that's not bound, because we are an open and always growing field, because we're interdisciplinary. I mean, just look at the backgrounds that the three of us come from and brought, and we're just a small representation of people who love this work. So I would also hope that at the center of our journal is that kind of people, person, power, place, time connection that inspires people to think more deeply and open more freely and engage with more intention at all the stages of the work that they're doing, whether it's imagining a study or interacting with participants and collaborators or writing up their article or doing their podcast, that there are so many ways of telling these stories, and that we're not really done with the work until the stories have been told.
Yeah. Yes. And stories require some sort of reflection. I'm going to answer my original prompt. Is Photovoice outdated here? With a reference back to Roland Barthes, who wrote this beautiful book called Camera Lucida. And in my graduate studies, I read it. He's the master of the run-on sentence, Ard. And so if you've ever been corrected for having too long a sentence, just read Roland Barthes and use the semicolon, and then you're good to go for a whole paragraphs. You can just have one sentence paragraphs full of semicolons. You're good to go. But anyway, there's a little bit of the photo nerd in the people that like to continue to do Photovoice work, right? So there are people that like that framed image. Some people in my larger family, I'm not mentioning the people next door, they don't want to go to an art gallery display that's just got photos on the wall, right? They want those stories, they want that engagement. That's kind of like the power of the words that go along with the photo. But Roland Barthes sort of argued against the moving image because he said it doesn't allow for that sort of the necessary reflection that you need to have when you encounter a still of something, right? And that reflection is actually an interactive moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always holding,
that holding of an important value that someone's trying to share with you. That piece of it is just so fun. Yeah.
Good stuff.
No, I'm really excited about these conversations, and I know they're going to be really, really great. And I'm excited to see the articles that come in to like we said at the beginning, right? To pick the method apart, to ask it the hard questions. How do we evaluate? How do we get the grant writers to appreciate what's going on here? How do we have short and long-term measures? How long is a Photovoice project? How long should a caption be? How do you keep people engaged? All those kinds of things we've been talking about. I'm very excited to see what people have to say about it.
Yeah. How do we push the field?